Get ready to dive deep into the unraveling of the global order, featuring the eye-opening book Disunited Nation by Peter Zian, where we explore how the collapse of globalization will impact the United Kingdom and what it means for our future. Disunited Nations by Peter Zian is a thought-provoking and engaging analysis of the current state of global politics and economics. The book discusses how the international order as we know it is rapidly unraveling, and that the world is headed towards a new era of fragmentation, competition, and conflict. The author begins by outlining historical context of the current international order, tracing its root backs to post-World War II era, when United States emerged as the world's dominant superpower. He goes on to describe various geopolitical and economic trends that are currently underpinning this order, that are currently undermining this order, such as raising nationalism, demographic changes, and technological innovation. One of the key themes of this book is the idea that the world is becoming incredibly fragmented as countries and regions become more self-sufficient and less reliant on global markets and less reliant on global trade and cooperation. Zian argues that this change has been driven by a number of variables, included the decline of the United States as a global hegemon and the rise of China as a regional superpower, and the growing influence of regional blocs like the European Union and the Asian nations. Throughout the book, Zian presents a wealth of data and analysis to back up his argument. He draws on a wide range from economical statistics to historical anecdotes to paint a vivid and compelling picture of the world today, making this book accessible to readers with very little background in economics, political sciences. Despite dire predictions for the world, Disunited Nations is ultimately a hopeful book. Zian argues that while the world may be entering a period of increased competition and conflict, there is also opportunities for nations and regions to thrive. He suggests that countries that can successfully adapt to these changes in the global landscape will be the ones that prosper in the years ahead. Overall, Disunited Nations is a highly informative and engaging book, and offers a unique and compelling perspective to the current state of affairs, and offers a unique and compelling perspective on the current state of global politics and economics. Whether you are a casual reader or a serious student of international affairs, this book is well worth your time. It takes around 12 hours to read, but every minute is interesting and thought-provoking. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this book as it has opened my eyes to some new concepts and new potential. The book's outlook for the UK, the world of globalization as we know it, is slowly going to begin to change. The Americans are now looking very much more inward rather than out. With America's newfound energy independence and the ability to grow sufficient food and manufacture their own products, there is very little need for the Americans to trade on the global scale like they did before. As the American people's political ideology has changed over the last decade, it has got to the point now where the Americans are starting to look very insular. This is not very different from what's happened to the UK. The UK over the last 10, 15 years has become very much more insular. We have been looking more and more inward to solve our problems. Then this is why Brexit came about. This is why the Scottish continuously want independence, because people are looking very inward to solve their problems rather than looking at the global state. And this is going to create several political issues as time goes by. The political ideologies of the different nations and how American foreign policy sculpted geopolitical landscape that we have today, and the creation of international trade, which we believe, or anybody who's under 40 believes, is just normal, didn't actually really happen much apart from the Commonwealth and other small trading affairs than it did after the World War. The Americans emerged as the leading global superpower after World War II, and they used that power and influence to sculpt the world order. They offered defensive contracts they pretty much defended the entire ocean. The Americans have the biggest navy, and they strategically placed their navy in strategic locations that ensured American commerce, to ensure the continued growth of the American economy. At the stage of World War II and for the last sort of 20 to 30 years after that, the American economy was the biggest economy bar none. And through the successes of everybody jumping on the bandwagon bandwagon, the introduction of China, starting to trade with the world using the powers that the Americans have created, have now made China one of the biggest superpowers in the world through economy and through their own military. And as politics has changed, where people start to look more insular, it is going to set up the world to change in a very big way. So the relationships between nations like, the Saudis and the Iranians, and how fragile that relationship is, where neither the Saudis or the Iranians want to get on and continuously try to undermine each other. Now, because for the last sort of 8 decades, the Americans needed the oil from that region before they found their own shale gas and reserves in America and became their own net biggest producer. There was a lot of reason why the Americans showed a lot of interest in the Middle East. And although we think that the Americans and the British and everybody else caused a massive amount of instability in the region, it is actually the opposite. How their influence and their control allowed the most amount of stability that area has seen in many decades. And as America moves out of the region, the Saudis and the Iranians are going to be fighting for supremacy. At the same time, discusses at large China and Russia's relationship and how China has become one of the leading superpowers through its industrial complex. And the problem with China's industrial complex is it's very resource heavy. It needs to import almost all of its resources. China is not food independent. It's not energy independent. And at the moment, it has a massive shortage of people. So how countries are going to be affected by this? Europe is heavily invested in Russian gas, which we have now found out since the Ukrainian war and since the gas lines were blown up. Germany has had to make deals with other countries. Now, that is where Saudis have come in. The Germans have signed a massive deal with the Middle East to import as much gas as they possibly can. It is still less than the gas they were going to get from Russia. So there's going to be and China has also signed a massive deal with the Middle East for their gas reserves. So the Middle East is going to go through a massive expansion in gas production and oil production, and this is going to create a jostling for supremacy. Now, before, the Americans were heavily vested in the area, so they had their military presence there, keeping stability in the area. Now, in order for the stability to come, it's going to have to be China and Germany that increase their military presence in those areas to keep stability and to ensure that the Saudis and the Iranians don't battle it out and destroy the whole infrastructure that the world desperately needs. Luckily for the UK, we are pretty much energy independent and we have the capabilities of creating much more energy. Unfortunately, our governmental policy stops that from happening. And this is where the tricky part for the UK comes, is how do we manage our commitments to the green revolution, which everybody who watches any of my videos already knows I believe is completely and utterly useless and doesn't benefit the country in any way, shape or form. But how does the country balance its commitment to the green revolution and its commitment to energy security for the nation? And this is where disunited nations really sort of wraps up the whole world in a manner that's really easy to understand and follow. And quite a few predictions in disunited nations that are quite dire. Peter Zian has been using facts to make his analysis, and although it's very geared towards what's going to happen in America, he does drop little nuggets of information as to how it's going to affect different countries around the world. And with his use of geography, history and current data, he sums up a very interesting sum up of the global politics and economics of the current nation. But national pride and pride in our beautiful country is what will get us through any struggle and any hardship. So until next time, take care.